Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sunil Rajguru, editor of PCQuest and CiOL.com, and your host for today's live webinar. A warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us here today. Our discussion today will be around unlock your data's full potential. You can start sharing your questions from now itself on the Q&A button below the screen. Now let me begin the proceedings. Just 1 minute. Yeah, just 1 minute. Thank you so much. Sorry, sorry for that slight delay. Okay. So, we are in, everyone keeps talking of the corona crisis, the COVID crisis. While it is a tragedy, somebody had said, I mean, it's usually attributed to Winston Churchill during World War II, that with every crisis comes opportunity. So whenever there's any, crisis happens, there's no point in sitting tight and waiting for it to be over. You have to use this opportunity to go ahead. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Sunil Rajguru, executive editor of PCQuest and CiOL. So you can get in touch with me after this webinar. So it was Tony Robbins who said that in every crisis lies opportunity. People who are successful are not lucky. They are just prepared for opportunities that come their way. Anticipation is power. And I think we are already seeing it, that anyone who was prepared, you see, if you look at the COVID crisis, technology has been the great accelerator, and people who have grabbed the opportunities have really zoomed ahead. So I'll just give you a small example. We forget that in the last 100 years, the biggest tragedy that we faced was World War II. Now, if you put the tragedy aside, we don't realize that in the last 100 years, that was the greatest technological acceleration that the world has ever seen. In fact, the world went to the next level. So for example, people talk of ENIAC being the first computer, but there was something called the Colossus computer that came much before that. That could be called the first computer. Then, while fighting with the Nazis, we did a tremendous amount of code breaking, and that led to advances in cryptography, which help the internet even today. Whatever you take, like for example, rocketry took off after World War II. And the rocketry led to the foundation of NASA. It led to satellites, it led to satellite TV, GPS, everything. Even something like jet planes and atomic energy happened. And curiously, the second great technological acceleration is happening now. We don't realize it, but it is happening in front of our eyes. If you look at the last 6 months, there has been a great technological acceleration. I mean, the biggest thing is the collaboration. Collaboration has really taken off. The webinar we are conducting is a result of that collaboration. Work from home. Now, if you take a few critical and essential services, we find that almost everyone can work from home. And hence the tools are being made accordingly. And we crossed, if you look at the mobile workforce, we crossed 1 billion some time back. But now we will be crossing 2 billion soon. So now we realize maybe you don't even need an office. You have your mobile, you have your home, you have collaboration tools, everything can happen. And in fact, it is not just these, it is the no-touch technologies that are really taking over. Like the Internet of Things. I mean, people don't know already there are more IoT devices than there are people. And someone has predicted that by 2030, there will be 500 billion. So we cannot even imagine. Industry 4.0 is going to be forced on us because of social distancing, no touch technology. And we'll also find drones and connected cars will take over. But through it all, one consistent thing is that data is still the new oil. That is not going anywhere. Data was king, data will be emperor. The data explosion continues. In fact, data centers, cloud operations, and even the devices that transmit data is increasing. Okay. In fact, like for example, already there are millions of data centers of all type. And a few years back, sometime back, something called a hyperscale data center was rare, but that has already crossed 500. Soon we'll have 1,000 hyperscale data centers. So it's become a data world. It's become a data center world. That is why storage will be important. If you're going to be flooded with data, if data is going to be traversing everywhere, you'll need to store it somewhere. And there are certain things like hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is going to encompass the entire globe. Then to crunch this data, to monitor it, artificial intelligence, analytics, they will all play a key role. So, this is my advice to you. I mean, this crisis does not seem to be ending. We thought it's already 6 months. I mean, it's going into 2021. So basically, we have to use this opportunity, and we have to go ahead with the technological acceleration. So with that, I'll end my presentation. So now I think we have a couple of presentations today, but before the main presentation, let's have a presentation by Sheikh Jalaluddin, Solution Architect, Pentagon System and Services Private Limited. Over to you, Sheikh.
Sorry, extremely sorry. Thank you, Sunil. Good afternoon to all of you. Myself, Sheikh Jalaluddin, associated with Pentagon as a solution architect since 2.5 years, and having more than 22 years of IT industry experience in India and abroad countries. So Pentagon system is a 480 crores organization by represents across leading metro countries, strength of 500 plus. We are all well managed, financially secure and stable company, having ability to execute your enterprise and mid-sized projects end to end. Pentagon has IT industry presence of last 25 years with nationwide presence and support across 2 countries in India. Skilled and specialists across various technology domains. Pentagon has a leading system integrator and HP Platinum partner, has top level partnership with global technology players, and hence having a deep expertise across IT infrastructure and technologies to offer leading industry solutions. Our vast experience in execution of critical projects at various levels and capacities make us your dependable expertise and of HP storage, migrations, replications, conducting POCs, and service support. So with this, I end my introduction and hand over this to Mr. Sunil to take us further.
Thank you for that presentation, Sheikh Jalaluddin. So I think now it's time. Let's move on to our. Sorry. Okay. Our main presenter today will be Manoj Kolekar, Senior Evangelist Technology, HPE. Manoj has more than 23 years of experience in the IT industry. He started his career when computers were just launched, and since then has been in various roles in the Unix database and the storage field. In his previous roles, Manoj was a senior evangelist and prior to that, a director, systems engineering. In his present role, he manages some of the large enterprise environments for HPE as a consultant. So I'll hand over the screen to you, Manoj, for the main presentation.
Thank you, Sunil. Thanks for the introduction. So if you look at today, we're here talking about the next generation platform on storage with regards to the offering that we have from HP. If I go in terms of the traditional way in which the industry had been growing, from the traditional architecture to what we are looking today and what is going to be coming 3 years or 4 years down the line. So if you look at this slide, so we had the virtualization, which in 2000 was really a boom, right? People never expected that you could have physical servers and then virtualize it into multiple instances. Then you had the databases, which has been there for 20-25 years, ERPs running in telecoms like SAPs and other ERPs. So those were the traditional applications which are of course being used nowadays also. But today you're seeing a lot of implementations or adoptions of newer technologies like the containers or IoT, and artificial intelligence is now becoming the key, right? Because people now want to have systems which are autonomous, like self-healing, self-understanding, and so there's a lot of intelligence which is now requirement. Now, if you look at the COVID, adding to what Sunil has said, we have all seen before COVID, we never expected that there could be any option for us to, sitting at home without any office, no travel, no customer meetings. How are we going to do a business? But just look, 6 to 8 months down the line, every business is running. I know there's a downfall in terms of how the businesses have been run, but there's no option. We are doing it, and we are using various, as Sunil said, the collaboration services, the platforms have been used today. Going ahead, we feel that this is how the trend is going to be, right? And everything is going to move on to an infrastructure where really physical presence might not be needed, but with that definitely comes the infrastructure. The infrastructure needs to be, so intelligent, future-proof, and technology-proof, right? So that's what we are going to talk about today. So before I could start with the presentation, let's understand from your perspective in terms of what do you feel in terms of how do you feel that the next generation storage platform should be, in terms of catering to the future needs or the business critical environments. So let's have a pool and understand your feedback, and then we can take the presentation ahead. So that's a cool question. I mean, it's all based on what you feel, right? I mean, what you feel in terms of what is the platform, the next generation platform you expect from based on your environment, your circumstances, your business criticality. So if you all have done, so on the pool question, I mean, it's basically all the things that have been there in the pool question as an option, right? So we really need to have a system which is 100% available, and we need to have scalability, simplicity, and the most important thing is it should be very simple. And I will talk about the new platform which is there on Primera. So that's the result here, 100% availability. Yeah, that's very key. One thing we didn't talk about, we see a very low ratings in terms of unmatched intelligence. Now, I will talk a little more. So this gives me a perspective on what your feelings are, right? And accordingly, I will actually switch my presentation tone. So unmatched intelligence, according to me and according to us, we feel that's one of the most important aspect going ahead, because we need to have something which is really very intelligent, and we'll talk about that more. Thanks a lot for sharing your feedback, and based on these inputs, I will actually gear my presentation towards making it more clear why intelligence is more important. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So if you compare in terms of, if you need as a customer, you would want to buy a critical storage platform. Now that on the storage platform, there are different options. You have the traditional platforms, or you have a platform which is in-house or very loading a very business critical, very higher-end enterprise applications. So yeah, these are the applications on which your business runs, right? So you need to ensure that these applications are running 24/7. Now, if you look at the characteristics of these higher-end platforms, is that they're very fast. Number one, they are very reliable, and secondly, I mean, they're supposed to run 24/7, 365 days. That's what it is. But they have a challenge in terms of the higher-end platforms are not agile, right? Anything that you need to do on this higher-end platform requires a lot of understanding. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of configuration things. On the other hand, we have exactly the opposite, which you talk about a public cloud, right? It's pretty very simple. You just go to a public service provider. You want a VM, you want capacity, you want CPUs. You swap your credit card, and it's very agile. You want to increase your instances, increase it, reduce it. So these are now two extremes, right? You get a storage where you want it for the business critical application, and then you have the public cloud. Now just imagine, right? If you get both of these, right? If you have an option where you get all the features of an enterprise class storage, and you also get the flexibility, the reliability, the on-demand experience of a public cloud. So that's what the future of storage is now going to be. It is no more going to be a traditional storage that I just buy a controller with a bunch of drives and then you manage it with a complex team and day-to-day monitoring operations. Right? We are talking about a platform which is primarily built for the next generation. Now, when I say next generation, what does it actually mean? Number one, these are the 4 pillars on which the platform, we're talking about a new platform which has been launched by HP about a year before. And that's actually going to change the entire way you're consuming a storage platform as you had been doing earlier. It's totally different. So what is this bent down? Now, this higher end platform is built on 4 pillars. One is a global intelligence. I'll talk about that in detail. Active architecture, service-centric code, and timeless storage. So my presentation now is going to be based on these 4 pillars. I try to simplify things as far as possible so that it becomes, it's more aligned with what you want to align with the business. Now, the platform I'm talking about is called as Primera. Primera stands for the primary storage of this era. So what is this primary storage of this era? This has been designed in a way, this system has been designed from scratch. It has been built from scratch, where you get the functionalities, reliability, stability of a higher-end storage, as well as you get the agility, efficiency of the cloud architecture. Now, it's been designed in such a way that it is first of all radically simple. Now, if anybody who has been using an enterprise storage, they know how complex the entire environment is managed. The more critical the environment, the bigger the enterprise platforms you have, it is very complex to manage. What we have done is we have brought a very simple radical approach in managing this entire architecture. Second is it is actually a consumption based model and it's timeless. When I say timeless, I mean it is technology obsolete. So going ahead, the way in which the technologies are changing, right? If you have something today, 2 years down the line, there are new technologies which will be available. So how do you protect those changes in the technology and adopt it seamlessly to your environment? That's the entire core of this Primera architecture. In terms of the family, I will just talk about, we have 3 platforms. Platforms, in a sense, these are the 3 models that are there in the Primera architecture. You have the 630, 650, and 670. So it's primarily in terms of how much performance and how much scalability these platforms can do, right? And the key here, now, the Primera platform is designed to deliver 100% availability guarantee. If you just go back 15, 20 years down the line and just have a view on which are the platforms which actually give 100% data availability. But those platforms earlier were called as a frame arrays or monolithic arrays, which means you buy a very big array, maybe 2 racks, 3 racks or something, and it's very complex to manage. But one thing that they delivered is I mean, those arrays were called as a cats. So when I say cat, it means if you kill a cat, 9 times should die. Which means those arrays, once you power on, it will never die. It will keep on working 24/7. So that's the amount of reliability that we have got onto this Primera array. Question is, how do we do it? Now, what we have done onto the Primera array is we have changed the entire kernel architecture. We have moved from a monolithic architecture to a totally service-centric architecture. What does that mean is, if you look at any traditional platform, on the storage system of the kernel, not only the storage, if you have a server or any platform which is there, you basically boot from a kernel. So your kernel is the one on which the storage platform boots, or even if it's a computer or a compute platform boots. Now, all the services that run in this kernel are basically tightly coupled to the kernel operating system itself, which means that anything that you need to do onto the storage system. Let's say you have brought a storage system today and you want to upgrade it to a new version. What needs to be done is you upgrade it to a newer version, and you have to reboot the entire kernel, which means any changes in the kernel has to be rebooted. These are called as a monolithic architecture, which is a traditional architecture which has been there for since ages. We actually moved from a monolithic architecture to a containerized operating system, which we call it a service-centric architecture, which means that once you boot the storage Primera system, every services within the Primera actually runs as a separate user space, which means that probably there are thousands and thousands of services running in that, and every service is running in its own user space. Now, how does that help in giving us 100% availability? Number one is, if at all you need to do anything, let's say there's a patch you need to put in onto the storage operating system, what you do is you just basically put the patch on only those services which are there and just restart those services, which means I am never ever going to reboot the Primera operating system once you power it on. It's only the services that are getting affected are actually rebooted. So this architecture is a totally changed architecture compared to other traditional storages. So that gives us the ability of delivering 100% data availability. There are other features also which I'll talk about in my next slides. So to start with, to tell you, Primera is the only platform today we have in a modular architecture delivering 100% availability. You don't need to buy a frame array, which you used to buy earlier. Those use architectures which are complex. So now you have a platform which can deliver tier 0, cater to tier 0 application, but at the cost of tier 1, because this is going to be a modular architecture. To give a brief on the features, so we have 3 platforms, as I said, 3 models that are there. I'm not going to go in detail on each and every of these models, but if you look at the amount of cache, for example, the 670 is having around 4 terabyte of cache. That's pretty huge cache which we have. We are talking about 160 Skylake processors. So these systems are really very powerful in terms of the physical processors, memories that they have. Now, one of the things that comes standard with this is the below what you see here is the performance insight, topology insight, workload insight, and Infosight. This is something which is very you would not have seen. In fact, this is not that. This is only the offering from HP, which is what we are talking about intelligence, and that's the core of the Primera platform. We have made it so intelligent that it has become autonomous, self-healing, and we'll talk about that in much detail later. So a Primera platform is a platform where you can actually scale up and scale out, which means you can now start with a controller with 2 controllers. You can scale it up to 4 controllers, and from 4 controllers you can scale it up to a newer model. So there is a good amount of flexibility that if you run out of performance or capacity, I have the option of either scaling it up or I have an option of either scaling it out. Right? So that's one thing which is there on the Primera, and everything that you can do on this Primera is non-disruptive. I mean, your applications will never come to know that there's an upgrade that has happened. The only thing that they would realize is today, if it's taking half an hour for me to do a process, it's probably going to take 10 minutes or 15 minutes by the upgrade. We have made this Primera platform, as I said, simplicity is the key going ahead, because everything is going to be remote. You need to have systems which are self-managed and simple. We have made the Primera platform so simple that you can actually install, once it is rack mounted and installed, it takes not more than 20 seconds for a Primera system to be able to, for the applications to be able to access the Primera platform. These are the key features of the Primera platform. So to give a brief, before I talk more about Primera, I will give you a brief on what platforms are. HP had 3 primary platforms. One was a 3PAR. 3PAR is a platform which is very matured for more than 10 years. Most of the features that you're seeing on these slides are the features of 3PAR technology that is there. About 3 years before, HP acquired a company called as Nimble. Nimble, the USP of a Nimble is a platform which is very, very simple to manage, install, configure, and it has been the USP of that is the efficiency, the amount of efficiency that it gives in terms of dedo, compression, and all the features. That's a Nimble platform we had. Then we had the 100% availability, which were the XPs. XPs are like frame arrays. Those arrays are used in environments where you have the 100% data availability. Right? Those arrays are the arrays which once you power it on, it doesn't go down. So what we did in a Primera, we took all the good features of these three arrays and wrote a code, a fresh code, which is the result what we have it now on the Primera platform. Right. So we have this feature in terms of it's NVMe enable. Now this is the array which is NVMe enable. When I say NVMe enable, I'm not talking about a normal NVMe drive. We're talking about the next generation NVMe, which is the JBoss. It's already JBoss enabled. Service-centric operating system, I already said. A lot of efficiency. So we'll take each and every steps. Number key feature here. Today we are talking about SSDs. I know about SSDs when SSDs came in around 2005-6 frames. It was very costly, and then very critical customer environments you started using SSDs. So you have 100 terabyte, for example, use 10 terabytes of SSDs. Today, if you look at SSDs in the mainstream, right? So I mean, most of the environments we say I want a flash. I mean, you have, other than if it's a backup environment, something, it's always the flash platform that people prefer now. So what has now from earlier where people used to have NLSAS, SAS, and SSDs, today SSDs have become the default platform or the default type that is there. Now, what we have is the NVMe, which is coming. NVMe is now in that stage, right? So people want NVMe, but it is not yet ready. So it is somewhere in between. We have NVMe. So you have storage system, which are NVMe systems, but you still use SSDs. You still use, a little bit of SAS drives. The roadmap of the NVMe architecture, 6 months to 1 year down the line, is NVMe is now going to become, just as we have SSDs now, NVMe is going to become the platform, which is the de facto platform. And the de facto platform is really going to change in the way the performance would be delivered from this protocol. Now, for that, we require something which is called as a very powerful, back-end parallel processing. So what we have on the Primera, we call it as the Asic chipset. Now, Asic chipsets are dedicated chipsets for doing parallel processing within the platform. What does it do is it does a lot of system functions internally. It basically, if you have a 4 system, it actually, the entire memory pool, the CPUs, the cluster, everything becomes part of the single global pool. So that's one of the key, which is very required for the NVMe. So Primera, we have the latest generation Asic chipset. So whenever the NVMe or JBoss, I'll talk about NVMe or JBoss in just a few minutes, we are already ready for doing that parallel processing. You have all the efficiency features of all flash array. You do deduplication online, you do compression online, we do data packaging online. Now this is a part of the all flash platform. So all the features are there. One of the key differentiator is the data packaging. Data packaging basically helps us to reduce the amount of IOs that are actually going onto the drive. Primera and a platform, we really have close to around 30 plus features. I'm just talking about a couple of new features which are more relevant and which are primarily the newer one. One of them is quality of service. Now, when you have a very critical environment where you have different types of applications, you should be able to actually be able to define which application gets what priority. So we have priority optimization, which is there on the Primera platform. Now you would say that, yeah, there are a couple of other platforms from other vendors also do that. One of the unique thing that we do on a Primera is you can put quality of service onto the latency. All the other platforms could do quality of service on IOPS and throughput. So I can cap the IOPS and throughput. We go a step ahead because one of the most critical thing is the latency. For example, if I'm doing 10,000 IOPS at 20 millisecond latency versus the 10,000 IOPS with just 1 millisecond latency, the response time is 20 times faster. So what we could do is we can actually define for the critical applications, we can threshold on the latency. So I can say this applications are business critical, and I want the response time of this application as 300 microseconds. The Primera array is designed to deliver 300 microseconds. It is do whatever it needs to do in the backend in terms of resource pooling to give it a 300 microseconds. So that's one of the unique feature that we have. Other thing is, if you look at a storage platform per se, storage has no intelligence in terms of what is going and coming. For him, it is just the zeros and ones, and it is just the IO in and IO out. You need to have a platform which is application aware. What I mean by application aware, that the platform needs to understand the behavior of various applications which are running onto the platform. So we need to have a platform, which understands that it looks at the entire, workload in real-time basis and make adjustments automatically. This is an autonomous car we talk about, where you don't have drivers, automatically adjusts itself so that it ensures that consistent performance and latencies are delivered for those applications. So why is it needed? Just imagine a business critical environment in your organization. One of your application user comes and said, I am having a very slow performance on this application. And this application, unfortunately, seems that it's one of the biggest or most critical application of your entire organization. Right? Now, because you have a performance issue, the first thing that happens is you go to the storage and say there's a storage problem. And you go to the storage and storage says that, okay, everything is fine. There's no problem with the storage. Now the problem is how to figure out where the problem is. If you need to really find out where the performance problem is, you have to go to the entire stack, which means I need to now go to the network and see, is the network a problem? I have to go to the server, I have to go and see whether the server is a problem, is the virtualization layer a problem, or the application tuning is a problem. The statistics says that more than 56% of the time, the performance issues that are faced by end customer is outside the storage. It is not inside the storage. So it is outside the storage. So now from the organization perspective, at the end of the day, it's a business critical application which is getting impacted. So what application aware platform on a Primera means, we are really not looking at the storage. We're actually going to the different layers of the entire infrastructure, including the servers and virtualization, and able to pinpoint exactly where the problem is. So that's the intelligence which has gone into the Primera. So when I say I'm Primera as a storage platform, I'm going beyond the storage, looking at your network, the compute, your application, and exactly telling you where the problem is and how it has to be resolved. So that's one very unique thing on the Primera platform which is there. Now, Primera platform, we have autonomous features which are there. On the first slide, which I shared, I said there are 4 standards which were there below. So what do you mean by performance inside? Now, just imagine you are running different types of workloads onto a platform, a storage platform. It could be tier 1, tier 2, tier 0 applications. Now, for the storage perspective, as I said earlier, the storage system doesn't understand whether it's a business critical application or it's a tier 2 application or you're doing a backup. There is no intelligence for it to really do anything. What we have done on the Primera platform is we have got the artificial intelligence into the code itself. Now, what does that code do? Number one is this platform is looking at the different workloads that it is serving from the end application perspective. It actually creates a baseline which is called a saturation level, right? So it says that, okay, this particular application this is working normally, so that's the saturation level of that particular application, and keeps on observing that application. Now this is happening nearly on a real-time basis. And so what if the application behavior changes? Let's say application is doing a latency of 1 millisecond, suddenly the latency becomes 2 milliseconds, 3 milliseconds consistently. It can exactly go and find out where the problem is, right? So what it goes is, it does the performance inside, it looks at what are the workload analysis, and it will tell you exactly what changes have happened. For example, you have changed the block structure of a particular application, so that's the reason the impact has happened. Where is the impact that has happened? Because of you're doing too much of writes, or there's some communication problem between a virtualization layer and the storage. So that's the amount of intelligence, artificial intelligence that has come onto the Primera platform. How does it help? Number one is performance issues to resolve are the most complex issues to resolve. Now, and that requires a complete collaboration between the different parts of the entire infrastructure. This basically helps you in terms of, you really don't need to worry about having human intervention there. There's a capability within the platform itself to analyze a workload and suggest changes and exactly tell you where the problem is, right? So in this scenario, it basically tells that the latency of this particular application has increased, and it will also tell you where the saturation is. Not only that, it will also give you a recommendation. Question is, I understand there's a problem, and this is the problem that is. The question is, how do I resolve it, right? So it doesn't, allow that thing as open-ended, statement for us in terms of, okay, this is the problem, now you resolve it. It will exactly tell you how you have to resolve, which is a recommendation engine that is there. For example, if you have 4 Primera platforms, and it will exactly tell you, okay, this Primera platform is not the right array for you. There's a second array which is there, which has good amount of resources. Why don't you move the application to the other resources? Number one. Number two, if you want it, it can actually move it to the other application. So that's a performance insight. Second thing is, how do I predict a what if scenario? What if scenario is, today everything is fine. My business is doing on very well. And now the organization says, okay, we are starting few more services to the end customers. So because of that, there's X amount of load that is going to come onto the array. Now, it's really very difficult, to pinpoint and exactly come to a figure, okay, whether the array is going to take this workload. How do you know? Unless and until you put that workload and say, okay, if it's working fine, that's fine. But if it's not able to take the load, then it's a challenge. So we have this feature called as workload management. Now, what workload management does is you can actually simulate the various environments. Let's say I have a particular Oracle environment, and I say, okay, what if I put in 20% more load on this particular instance? You can just, simulate that environment. The array will do the entire analysis for you and tell you how is the future going to look like. Is it the array going to take that load, or what happens to the array? For example, the array says, okay, I'm putting 20% load. My CPU utilization will jump to 40 to 60. My system resources will be so much. Or how is it going to look like? So the question here is, now it is not that you are not in a position to there's nothing called as assumptions. It's not assumptions. It exactly tells you. So whenever you're putting a new load, you can actually simulate that environment on the primary array, so you're 100% sure that array is going to take the load. If not, it will also give you a recommendation of what needs to be done, or if there's other array, it will suggest you that you need to put a workload on the other array. The autonomous features which I talked about on the primary array is nothing but it is basically I would say a very small subset of the Infosight platform that we have. Now, what is the Infosight platform? The first 4 pillars which I said, the first pillar in the initial slide, the first pillar was talking about global intelligence. To make things simpler, let me tell you what a global. Let's if you look at Google Maps, for example, Google Maps is one of the best examples for global intelligence. So if you need to go from a place A to a place B, you open up the Google Maps and say, I need to go from A to B, right? It exactly tells you, okay, how much time is it going to take you from reaching from place A to place B? That's one aspect of it. Now you for example, you're going to a customer meeting, you've sat into the car, okay, and it's actually real time. It suddenly pops up. I find a better route. You will reach 10 minutes earlier. Now, how is it all doing that? How does Google really know that there's an alternate path which is there? Or for example, there's an accident somewhere. It will tell you there's a crash 4 kilometers down the line. Please follow the alternate routes. It's all doing intelligence. This all happens because of global intelligence, which means that all the devices, all the mobile phones devices, the satellite, all are communicating. Just give me a minute, sorry. Yeah. Are communicating, and the information is AI analytics which runs, and you get this information on a real-time basis. So this is called as Infosight. We call that as Infosight is a AI big data analytic platform from HP. It is not new. It's been there since 2010. To give you this amount of size, we are collecting close to 1.3 trillion data points every year from this platform. What does this do? Basically, it does a cross-telemetry. Cross-telemetry means whatever applications you have which are running onto the platform is basically, let's say I'm running a hypervisor instance. Let's say I'm running VMware on my platform. So what it's doing, it's looking at my VMware instance. It's looking at all the other hypervisor instances across the globe, across all the customer install base, and it's looking at the behavior pattern which is there. So if at all it finds that there's some issue in many of the customer, it exactly knows what's the problem, and it will scan all the install bases and figure out if there's any other probability of any other customer getting impacted. It does something which is called global learning, which is the platform which I talked about, similar to Google Maps. Other thing, it's a predictive analytic engine. Now, this is very key. See, I buy a platform which is very reliable, okay, very sturdy, right? But the question is, if at all there's something, what happens if something goes wrong, right? Not in terms of downtime, but let's say performance issues, or you have some other challenges, or the application is slow. Right? What happens? You you call up a support center and tell them I have a problem, and that's how the process becomes, which is called the proactive process. So what it does is it's a predictive analytics, which means that before the problem occurs, we're able to arrest that problem and resolve it. And there's a recommendation engine. Subset of that is already there in the Primera, which I just discussed a couple of. The thing is also tied to the support automation. Now, what it means is that today, if you have a problem on the platform, you basically call up the support center, and that's how the case escalation happens. So this Infosight is actually tied to the support platform, which means that you don't need to call up the support center. 96% of the time, we are observing a system any which way is real time every 5 minutes. If at all we see that there's a possibility of something going wrong into your platform, a case will be automatically opened up, and we will reach out to you either by mail or phone calls, and we'll give the recommendation or the resolution there and there itself, right? So that's a framework of the Infosight platform, which is there on the Primera platform, which is there on all other storage platforms, like the 3PAR, the Nimble. It is also there on the HCI platform, the DSI platform. It is also there on the Compute platform. So that's about Infosight. It's a predictive analytics that we have in HP since 10 years, and some subset of that is actually gone into rebuilding the Primera. So the autonomous features of the Primera is nothing but a subset of the AI platform that we have. How does the predictive analytics work? So I said global intelligence. We have been collecting telemetry data for 10 years for more than lakhs and lakhs of systems. And as I said, we now have collected close to 1.3 billion data points, sorry, 1.3 trillion data points. Now, there could be a case where we have never encountered a problem. This is sometimes the first problem that we have encountered. What we do is, if we face a problem, what we do is we scan the entire telemetry data set to see if any of our customers for the past 10 years have faced this problem. If they have faced the problem, we have a remedy and we give the resolution immediately without doing any analysis, because the analysis is already done. If at all it's a new problem, you open up a case, which is a normal support case that you open up. We do the resolution or the root cause analysis of the problem. We resolve the problem, and we put the signature, which is the case resolution signature, into a telemetry database. Now, what happens later on? Once you put the signature to this new platform, we scan all the signatures of all the install bases across the globe and try to figure out if any of our customers may probably in future, if he's going to get impacted because of this issue, we will actually call the customer, stop the problem from happening in the first place itself. So that's how the predictive automation works on the Infosight. And this is one, Infosight itself is actually a very big topic. I mean, take about an hour to actually talk about those features, but this is very unique. If you are in a virtualized environment, you would have observed this. We have something which is called, if you have a virtualized environment, and it can actually do end-to-end predictive analytics for a virtualized environment, right? For example, if you have one of the VM which is becoming slow, it can exactly tell you where the problem is. It will tell you, is it a problem with the storage? If it's a problem with the storage, what do you have to resolve? Is it a problem with the hypervisor physical host? If it's a physical host, where is the problem? Is it a memory CPU, or is it an actual problem with the VM? So it can do an end-to-end cross-stack analysis for a hypervisor or VMware environment. One of the most important thing here is a noisy neighbor. Now, what is a noisy neighbor? Let's say I have thousands of VM. There can be one VM which is creating so much noise into the entire hypervisor environment that the entire hypervisor environment slows down. Finding out a noisy neighbor is like finding out a needle in a haystack. Right? It's one of the most difficult thing to find, because you have so many VMs and just one VM is creating the noise. The Infosight analytics, which is almost a real-time analytics, exactly can go and point out, after these 1,000 VMs, this is one particular VM which is creating the noise, and you can actually take action on top of that. So how does it Infosight actually helps? Number one is there is no more escalation. So as I said, Infosight is tied to your support center, which means that all the L1 and L2 operations basically are taken care by Infosight. You don't need to call a support center. Okay. Second thing, there is no root cause analysis. Just as when you call up a support center, he will ask you for your logs, you do the analysis. There is nothing called as a loop shot analysis, because your systems are being monitored 24/7, and this analysis is already done by the AI engine. Third thing is, you don't need to call up the support center, because we are looking at your systems and we exactly know how your systems are behaving, and we can exactly predict if there's a problem that is going. So we will call it. So these are three differentiators of the Infosight, which is there. Okay. So timeless storage. What's a timeless storage? So if you buy something today, and the way in which the technologies have been changing nowadays, gone are the days where I can say I'm taking a particular platform and I would use it for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, right? Every year and a half, there are new technologies which are coming up, and the way in which the technologies are bombarding the entire industries is a lot of things are actually happening, right? For example, the NVMe stuff, right? You will have NVMe JBoss coming up. We have the SCM which are already there. So if I buy something today, how do I ensure that I'm protected for the next 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years down the line, right? I don't need to, worry about, how do I migrate? The major challenge of moving from a platform A to platform B. Why would you move from a platform A to platform B? Is because there are new features which are coming, there are new technology which are coming, and the existing platform doesn't support it. So you need to probably move on to a new platform. There are a lot of things, challenges. None is again, you buy a new platform, then you do have a painful migrations, you keep on migration. Not necessarily all the migrations are online. There's a lot of downtime which is required, right? So it's a very mammoth task if you have to really maintain with the current technology thing that is there. So what does Primera timeless storage offers? Primera timeless storage is an offering from HP, and this offering is also there for other platforms, which means that when you procure a Primera platform, you can go in for an option which is called as a timeless storage. What it means is we ensure that your platform is always protected from the technology obsolescence, which means whatever newer technologies are going to come in next 3 years. Let's say today you have a SSD-based storage. Tomorrow, by 3 years, as I said, NVMe is going to be the de facto drive platform. Okay, 3 years down the line, what we do every 3 years, you would actually go ahead and replace the existing controller that you're having to the latest generation controllers which are there after 3 years, right? Not only from the controller perspective, we can also, for example, if it's a SSD and NVMe is going to be there, we can also do a drive media replacement. How does it help? Number one is you don't need to worry about all those migrations, buying a new storage. It's auto process. Every 3 years, as far as in the contract, we actually keep on upgrading your controller. Okay, to the latest generation controls that is. This has been, we have seen a lot of customers really interested because number one is they're protected in terms of technology. Number two is there's nothing in terms of migration. There is zero downtime, no downtime at all, right? No migration that is there. That's one of the features you can look at from the HP Primera platform. So that's what I had in terms of Primera. To summarize, what is the Primera? It's a 100% data ability platform. So which means you power in the Primera today, you will never have to reboot the Primera, right? And it's a 100% data availability guarantee. There are no separate agreements that you need to sign. Number two is it is the only storage which is the next generation autonomous storage, which means the storage has so much amount of intelligence that it can actually look at your workload and do suggestible changes automatically within the platform itself. So as to ensure that your workloads that are there, business critical workloads, always get the consistent performance, throughput, latencies that is there. Third thing is the recommendation engines in terms of you can actually do a what if. Okay, you can simulate your workload exactly in terms of what if I'm going to add one more load. Fourth thing is Infosight. Infosight is as I said, Infosight is a machine learning global intelligence, which means now what it's doing is it is not just looking at your platform, it is actually looking at all the install bases across the globe, and it is looking at your platform, and all the intelligence that we are collecting, we are actually putting it back in terms of predictive analytics. So we ensure that before you have any problem that happens, we are actually able to stop it there, and there itself before the problem actually happens. So that's what I had actually in the presentation, and thanks a lot. Thanks for your time. So we'll have some Q&A after this, and then.
Yeah, thank you, Manoj. That was a very engrossing and enlightening presentation. So it's time to take your questions. You can ask your questions by typing in the Q&A button that you can see below your screen. So I'll ask the first question. How does the Infosight licensing work? Is it capacity based or array based?
So Infosight is not a license; it's a feature of the storage. So there is nothing in terms of the installer software. So it's the moment you buy a Primera array, it's a feature. Just as every storage comes with a support, so you call up the support center. So instead of calling up a support center, what we do is we have this website which is Infosight. You register your array and it is there for you. So to answer your question, no licenses, no software install. It's a default feature. It's a part of a feature set which is there on the Primera array.
Okay. So does Primera support 3DC replication, and does it need FC connectivity for replication?
Yeah, so Primera supports all types of replication, whether it's a 2DC, it's a 3DC. It supports both over fiber channel and IP. And one additional thing that it supports, which very few vendors can do today, is it when you say 3DC, you're talking about RPO0. We're talking about RPO0 and RTO0, which means if one of the site fails, the application will move on to the second site and they will not even realize. So that we call as a peer persistence. So we do support 2DC, 3DC plus RPO0, RTO0, all these options.
So then the next question is, what are the performances of the various Primera arrays?
Performances are dependent on what models you're doing. So as I said, there are 3 models and there are various configurations of the model. You can start with 2-node architecture, then move on to the 4-node architecture. You can start with model A and model B. So it depends on how it is, maybe 1 million to 2 million. But one of the most important is we are talking not only from the performance, we are really talking about the latency. Now these Primera arrays are able to deliver maximum 300 microseconds of latency. So that's what it is. So not just the performance, the latency is the most important thing, and we are committing 300 microseconds of latency.
Okay. Then predictive analytics is a strategy which is gaining an insight into the future needs that certain customers may already have. So I'm not clear anyway. I think predictive analytics and how that can, take care of future needs of certain customers. Maybe you can speak something about that.
Sure. So when I say predictive analytics, basically it means that before something happens, right? So it's like you're going to a doctor. You're there in a hospital in ICU, right? And you're being monitored. Your pulse is getting monitored. Your blood sugar levels are getting monitored 24/7. So it's like you feel something, you're feeling sick, and you go to a doctor. That's one option. Second is the systems are getting monitored 24/7. So anything difference happens in the entire organ. Let's say your pulse speed goes up, right? We come to know your pulse speed goes up, and before something happens to you, we say, okay, your pulse speed are high, you better do this, you better take a rest or something. That's what you call a predictive analytics. That's now becoming a reality, because we cannot wait for something to happen and then try to resolve it, right? The entire idea of predictive analytics, before something happens, you basically catch it over there and resolve it. That's the main purpose of.
Okay, so there's one related question: does AI really deliver that much in workload management, and are the preemptive recommendations that good?
So to give my experience primarily, because I have been observing this Infosight for almost 5-6 years now. Okay, to give a statistics perspective, 96% of the time we resolve problem before the problem happens. Okay. And 98% of the time we actually call up the customer and get rather than customer calls up. So only 2 or 3% of the time the customer will actually call up the support center. In terms of recommendations, I have seen a lot of instances where very business critical possibility of downtime we have avoided. The reason is because it's not your system. See, I'm observing my system. The only intelligence that I will have is what I have right now, right? But moment I'm expanding to the global, where I've 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs of systems, I'm actually getting all this information and giving the recommendations. So at least 96% is what we have seen. We have been able to predict and stop the devil.
So then one more question. You mentioned as a service model. Does that work for SMBs that pay for use?
So yes, from the Primera perspective, I would say as a service model is number one is a service-centric operating system, right? When I say model, I'm not talking about, so you do have Primera options from the service provider also, but when I'm saying as a service model is the timeless storage, what I'm talking about, right? Which means you can start up with small scale from 2 controllers to 4 controllers from model A to model B, right? And the timeless storage basically, takes care of your future upgrades or technology obsolescence.
And I think we're out of time. I'll take one last question.
Sure.
Flash will eliminate obstacles related to application performance, availability, manageability, scalability, investment protection, and disaster recovery. What needs to be considered first?
Yeah, as I said, see, you can have a system which is physically very strong. Okay, you can have a system which can physically not fail, right? You can have a flash or the newer NVMEs which will come in, which will ensure that you get much higher performance, lower latency. But what is happening, what we are really looking at in terms of the exponential growth and the dependency of having everything remote is the ability of the system itself to be so intelligent to auto heal, right? So you would get all those features on a flash, but what about auto heal? Something goes wrong with such a complex environment, it's physically to resolve that thing, it requires a good amount of human effort. If that intelligence goes within the array itself, and if it's able to heal on its own most of the time, then you have almost resolved most of the problems that are there.
So I think like we're out of time. So what we'll do is I would like to thank Manoj Kolekar and Sheikh Jalaluddin for their presentations and taking out the time. And on behalf of PCQuest, HPE, and Pentagon System and Services Private Limited, I would like to thank all our participants today for joining this webinar. We hope you found it useful, and don't forget to fill in the feedback form. Have a great day, all of you.